I've heard enough right now about the Francis Scott Key bridge collapse to think it could be an accident. But there are still many questions that I think lead to a potential it was a deliberate attack. We don't know. The official statement from the government is it was not intentional, it was an accident. But boy, it's fascinating how, with all of this space, the ship just perfectly, over a period of 20 minutes, just turns right into this pillar. Now, I think it's fair to say that we should be operating under the assumption that it was an attack because we are involved in numerous international conflicts. But it very well may be a perfect storm of an accident. The way they described it, many individuals described it yesterday in our super chats and our members over on Timcast IRL, was that the power goes out and the ship is now like adrift. When the power kicks back on, they restart the engines and crank it to full power. And anybody who's ever watched a balloon, when you release the air, it just sputters in random directions. The force in the back is pushing so hard, it's shoving the front of the ship to the right. Makes sense. It's kind of like how if you've ever launched a firework, it could like veer off because the pressure in the back is so high, it's trying to push itself forward and then the weight tips. And yeah, it makes sense. And so they dropped the port side anchor to try and correct for this, but it wasn't enough and it slammed into the pillar. Makes sense. But I certainly think an investigation is warranted. And we didn't get one. The bridge collapses and a couple hours later, they're like, everything seems to be okay, everybody. Don't ask questions. Your government is in control. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene said there should be an investigation. Was it an accident or was it an attack? And I think that is the intelligent thing to do. But then we see this. The Wire creator David Simon calls Marjorie Taylor Greene a submoronic pratfall of a human being for questioning if the Baltimore bridge collapse was intentional and demanding an investigation. Huh? I kid you not. Jimmy Dore exemplified this perfectly with a comedy bit about how you've got these people who are just like, don't look into it. Don't ask questions. And he's like, that used to be called reading. Now they're like, please tell me you're not doing your own research. What? Yo, one of the largest ports in the country is now shut down. Okay? A bridge just collapsed and people are dead. Before we jump to conclusions, I think it's fair to say the indication we have currently is that it was not intentional. However, we are currently investigating to remove all doubt. I think that's fair. So Marjorie Taylor Greene says, there should be a serious investigation into the horrifying tragedy of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Maryland. Is this an intentional attack or accident? Now, the context that pops up is Baltimore Police Commissioner Richard Worley said there's absolutely no indication there's any terrorism or that this was done on purpose. Governor Wes Moore confirms the ship's crew issued a mayday and communicated they were experiencing a power issue. Okay. If there was a cyber attack in the industrial control systems of this vessel, I don't know exactly how they work, or sabotage that kills the power kicks back on and the engines go straight to full blast, causing it to shift. That can be easily calculated in a cyber attack. Easily. Now hold on there just a minute. I think it would be fair if we pulled up. I also think it's fair to point out, is this even Marjorie Taylor Greene's account? Let's pull up MTG Green on X. And let's see what we got here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, that is her account, of course. And I'm gonna pull up the tweet. I'm gonna scroll right down to the full context because, of course, she said in response. So there's a little bit more. She said, "Is an intentional attack or accident? Praying for the victims, survivors, and families." So why is this guy from The Wire saying, "Are you intentional or just an accident? You complete submoronic pratfall of a human being." There's a lot to be said here. I think this very much encapsulates the culture war so perfectly. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't say anything political. She didn't insult anybody. She didn't say anything bad. She's like, wow, we should look into this. Let's take a look at when she posted that too. She posted this at 12:32 p.m., March 26th, so yesterday. And so this is like just afternoon. We didn't have a lot of knowledge about what was going on. And she simply asks, and instantly, you've got these people being like, how dare you? I'm going to throw it to our good friend Jimmy Dore, who nails this in this 2-minute bit. 2 minutes kind of a long thing, but it's so good, it needs to be played. So I will play it for you now.
The weird thing that happened around COVID, I'd never noticed this before in any other time in my life, but you weren't allowed to ask questions and at any point during this. You just had to do what the man on the TV said, right? You had to do what the man on the TV said without questions, and then you're a good person.
That's right.
But if you question it, then you're a white supremacist Trumper. They're like, whoa, no. No, I didn't vote for Trump. I just have questions. Jimmy, only dumb people ask questions.
That's right.
Isn't that weird? It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Even comedians would get on stage and they would shame people for trying to get informed about a medical treatment that was experimental that they had to take or they would lose their jobs and they wouldn't be able to travel. And when people tried to get informed about that, other people shamed them. They would say, please tell me you're not going to do your own research. You've heard people say that. Please don't do your own research. You know, before COVID, doing your own research used to be called reading. Now you're shaming me for reading? At the behest of Big Pharma? It's like I woke up in the middle of a Bill Hicks bit. Well, looks like we got ourselves a reader. That's how much people internalized the propaganda from Big Pharma, was that they would be anti-intellectual enough to shame people for reading while they're wagging their finger at them for doing it. You would never shame people for trying to get informed, no matter what other subject it was, no matter how unimportant. Like if I say, hey, I'm gonna go buy a car. Don't look into it. Well, how will I know which car to get? Ask the salesman. He's the expert. What are you, Henry Ford?
Shout out to Jimmy Dore. And I'll give a good shout out to our friends over at the New York Times. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, isn't helping in the fight against misinformation. What is going on? This is the culture war, my friends. It really comes down to people who are intentionally lying to manipulate. Shout out to our good friends, the Krasensteins, who that's basically what they do. They're sophists. And people who are just trying to figure things out. Or I should say, then the default people who are so like the general thing is, you've got people like, David Simon, who insults and attacks Marjorie Taylor Greene for simply saying, we should investigate. Yeah, Jimmy Dore nails it. Do as the man on TV says or else. What? What is wrong with people? Wow, it really is wild. There is, maybe it's evolutionary. You know what I mean? Take a look at it this way. In the wilderness and in survival, the inquisitive individual is more likely to adapt to a change in circumstances. You have Grok in the year, shout out to Twitter, by the way, but Grok, there we go, I'll say Grok, in 20,000 BC. And he notices there's more water coming down waterfall. Strange. And, he goes and he says, I see water, more come. And then they go, oh, Grok crazy. Water come, Grok crazy. And he's like, So then he climbs up, takes a look, and there's a natural levee, and there is a large downstream coming. The levee is about to break. It's eroded naturally, and now there's going to be a massive surge, which will flood the river and head downstream and wipe out the village. So he runs down and says, Grok ask question, Grok look, water come. And they go, no water come. Grok crazy. Grok stupid. So he takes his family and they go uphill, and then a flood comes and kills everybody. I mean, it's a ridiculous analogy, but you get my point. In nature, those who are inquisitive are more likely over a long period of time to avert danger by seeking to better understand. Duh. We build technology by asking these questions. But then you get tons of people that are just like, meh, I don't care. Well, then the flood comes and washes them away. So let's use this scenario. Let's say it was an attack, not an accident. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't say one way or the other. She says we should investigate. So we decide to investigate because it's a major disaster. And it turns out it was an attack. This guy goes, no, it wasn't. And then the bad guys come and storm the gates. And he's like, how could this have happened? If only we knew. And then they wipe him out. My point is, In nature, those that are more inquisitive and looking into things are more likely to survive. And those that ignore these things will get caught by surprise. And as they say, chance favors the prepared. But now that we've created this bubble world where everyone is safe and secure, you've got people like David Simon who are just like, don't look into it. Ask the car salesman. He's the expert. Well, these people are not going to survive over a long period of time because they're going to be caught off guard and constantly stumbling over rocks in their path because they're not looking where they're walking. It really is. That's a much simpler analogy. Marjorie Taylor Greene is walking. She goes, is that a hole? Should we look into whether we should avoid that? And then this guy goes, you moron, don't look into it. And then walks and falls into a hole. That's the reality. Maybe what the culture war is a natural consequence of people who are not inquisitive and incapable of critical thinking now coming to terms with the dangers and excesses of humanity. And so we are beset with these questions where you have these large group of people who have survived thanks to the ingenuity and perseverance of those who are inquisitive. We want them to survive, but they have built up a critical mass of non-critical thinkers, which will vote for their own destruction. And thus come the hard times, which will result in a collapse, and those of an inquisitive mind are more likely to survive. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. What I can tell you is I saw this and I was like, Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't even say anything. She literally just said, we should look into this. And this guy just goes nuts. It's not even about just being it's not even just about attacking Marjorie Taylor Greene, calling her ignorant. It's about the rage, the pure anger they have. He just hates Marjorie Taylor Greene for no reason. That to me is the weirdest thing. What we're facing now in this country is coming off of this massive pandemic. We've got a crisis in Baltimore with this port. We've got inflation now underway. Coal exports have been stopped, which means a lot of those who work in the coal industry are going to see a jam up. If you're not getting that product out, how will that impact the orders? If a company ordered a certain amount of coal and that coal is delayed, that company halts, they're not going to order more coal because the last order is not coming. How does that affect you working the coal mines or the coal factory or refineries or whatever it may be? It's going to cause huge issues. Knowing why this happened is of utmost importance because we don't want it to happen again. Doing an investigation should be the first thing. Now, perhaps the real issue is it was an intentional attack on our infrastructure. And the reason why they're saying shut your mouths is because of potential for escalation before we're ready. Man, it really is a difficult scenario. I view what's happening in this country, the moral degradation, the technological degradation. It just feels like everything's falling apart. I think it's fair to say, and it's true, we as the general public cannot know everything, both from the capabilities of our time and energy that we have to research things, but also because of security. It is fair and it is true. There's a reason why we have classified information. If the U.S. just came out and said, here are all of our defensive capabilities, we would be destroyed overnight. I mean, now, not necessarily there's a gun behind every blade of grass in this country, so that probably keeps us safe from most invasions. So that's why, I'm not a big fan of world policing because I'm just not worried about being conquered. You got too many guns. You step foot in West Virginia and every single house is pointing a gun at you. Good luck. You can talk all day and night about you need F-16s and nuclear weapons to beat the government. No, you don't. Okay. Joe Biden, when he said that, he's basically saying he could genocide America, but he couldn't conquer it. Your choices are extermination or retreat because you ain't taking it over. That ain't going to happen. I don't know. Maybe they're trying, I guess, because most people just want to be left alone. They just want to be left alone. They don't want to deal with this stuff. But where we're at right now, and I think it's fair to mention, when it comes to classified information, we have this challenge. Do we trust the deep state? Not anymore. Not if they went after Donald Trump the way they did. You want to go after a sitting president, claim he's a Russian agent or whatever you want to claim? You need proof. You need proof. They don't have it. There is no proof. You want to claim Trump committed fraud? Here we go with the sophistry again. Oh, the summary judgment, judge bangs the gavel and then says Trump has to pay $500 million. because of the interest. It's up to like 500 and something million right now. That's never been done before in history. There's no way that's legitimate. Trump committed no fraud. It's a lie. They say Trump overvalued his properties and argued, this is what the Krassenstein said, he argued that you could put more units on them than you actually could. And I'm like, so he gave an assessment that was incorrect. And then the question is, did the banks do their own? Oh, they did. This is the craziest thing. A world where you can come out and say, this is a really great product and do all these things. Okay, every car salesman should be in prison because, how many stories have you heard where the car dealership says, why don't you get our premium package reserve plan, which for an additional $1,000, you can bring the car in any time for any service. You go, any service. You anything's wrong with that car, you bring it in, we fix it, you pay up front. And you go, okay. And then one day you hear a clanking and the car's having trouble. So you bring it in and they go, oh, well, we don't cover that one. That's not fraud? Remarkable. In New York, you look at the property values tax assessment, they're full of it. They're lying. And so my point about security is we need an intelligence and military apparatus in this country for security reasons. We, the general public, can't know everything because it would allow our enemies to know everything. So some secrets have to be kept. But then what ends up happening is we have these psychopaths who are exploiting that system for personal gain and for power. And now here we are between a rock and a hard place. A major bridge collapse. They're not going to tell us what happened. They come out immediately without doing any investigation saying we know exactly what happened. No, you don't. But they sent a mayday. So what? Someone cyber attacks a shipping container, a shipping vessel, a cargo vessel, container vessel, whatever, and the power goes out. Of course they'll send a mayday. That proves it was an accident. No, it doesn't. They drop anchor. Not enough time to stop the vessel from steering into the pillar. But a lot of people are pointing this out. You look at the time it took. I think it was someone mentioned like 20 minutes. It started veering off course. I don't know if that's true. Before the power even went out, apparently it was veering off course. Then the power shuts off. How do we know it wasn't an intentional sabotage by the one guy who was inside? Now people are saying the pilot of the ship, Ukrainian. What could that mean? I have no idea. It's funny because there's this meme where it's like the leftist conspiracy theory is that the corporation that owns the vessel had once done a partnership with this other company. Going back to 1970s, you can see that this organization, blah, 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 blah. And the right-wing conspiracy, they said, is the pilot was Chinese or Ukrainian or black. And I'm like, I think the right-wing conspiracy is cyber attack, to be honest. Oh, I guess that one's actually not right-wing and it may be plausible. Well, there's certainly many people on the right who are saying maybe it was diversity, equity, and inclusion. I said from the get-go, I don't know about all that. You can't isolate a single person. Like, show me the history where the individual that they hired to pilot this vessel, the apparently Ukrainian guy, was brought on for this reason or something. Cyber attack seems to make the most sense, or intentional act of sabotage. How could they come out without doing an investigation and just say, we know? Well, let's bring it back to the core as we wind things down in this wonderful segment. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't do anything. This is remarkable. The insults and the attacks. Here we go. Anthony Sabatini says DEI did this. I think that's silly. Like, I don't know how you can claim DEI did this. It's too perfect of a storm for this to be incompetence, in my opinion. So accident or intentional, but not incompetence. Maybe. I guess incompetence is on the list, but the idea is that we diversity hired a pilot for the vessel, and then when the power went out, they jammed the engines forward, causing it to shift and then drive into the pillar or something. Maybe. David Simon says, your mother did you, but after a hard life of service on a truck stop lot, you can really hold her loosened, battered womb responsible for dropping you headfirst on the Winnebago floor and burdening our society with another empty, racist demagogue thereafter. We cannot. Wow. No wonder The Wire was such a good show, because this guy is an emotional blowhard who has no idea what's going on. Anyway, I'm still not convinced it was an accident. I don't know for sure it was intentional, but I will stress it is remarkable that we live in a society where there are people saying, don't look into it. Ask the car dealer. He's the expert. The police chief knows why the bridge collapsed. He didn't even need to do an investigation. So it reminds me of that Family Guy joke where what's the Pawtucket Patriot? What's the name of the bar they go to in Family Guy? I don't know. It burns down. And they're like, oh no, the bar burned down. It was bought by some British guy. And then later on, someone's like hiding in a closet and he's like, I burned down the building for the insurance money. And then, oh yeah, it's the insurance salesman. He walks out of the closet and he goes, wait a minute. And then something happens where they're like, weren't you at all suspicious that this bar burned down right after he got fire insurance? And he goes, what do you mean? It happens all the time. Like, that's the joke. Buildings burn down almost every time someone buys insurance. It's totally normal. That's the thing. That's what I feel like we're dealing with here. What do you mean? The police chief didn't need to do an investigation. He just talked to the guy and said, accident. That's it. We didn't check the computer logs. Nobody did. Nobody had time to. We didn't do any reconnaissance. We didn't do any general investigation. We didn't interrogate the people who were on the ship. They just said it was an accident. So it was. Welcome to your brave new world. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.